This class is going to introduce you troubleshooting of control panels. And there's a million ways you can try to troubleshoot them. I'm going to give you the way that works out the best in my knowledge, and hopefully you can take that tool and work with it further. Some of the basic tools you'll need is a screwdriver. You'll need both a large and a smaller one because some of the components have small wires in them. You'll need a meter. The meter needs to check both continuity and voltage, not necessarily just voltage. Some of the things that can go wrong with the control panels are, of course, the float switches, so you're better off to have a few spare floats with if you are going out to troubleshoot a control panel. And then the control panel itself, if you know what model number it is, and that makes it so much easier if you actually take one of those out into the field, so you've got some spare parts off the control panel that you can get the customer up and going, and then later build them out for the accessories that you took out of the panel. HD Fowler carries many different control panels that either are on demand or timered. This happens to be an MVP control panel, and how you'll know that, there's two ways. One, the sticker on the door, and number two, it'll have the Siemens logo unit in it. Now with these logo units, we can use them for different options. You can use them either as a timer, or it could be a duplex alternating setup, and we'll use those instead of the black alternators. Some of the key things, like I was saying before, that you need to look for in the control panels when you get up to them: see if the control breakers are off or the pump circuit breakers are off. If they are, then more than likely they've been tripped. Turn the control circuit breaker back on. You can leave the pump one off for troubleshooting and diagnostic work. Make sure that you do get an LED readout in the Siemens logo box. It could be anything as a bunch of numbers will show up, or it could be the date and time. It all depends on what's going on with it. Another thing too, what you can do is take the handoff manual switch and flip it into manual, ensure that the motor contactor engages. If the motor contactor engages, that lets you know that you do have control power throughout the control panel. This will be the same with virtually all of the control panels. You'll have a control power in, and you'll have a handoff auto switch. This happens to be the S1 PT. It can come with some different options. This one actually has the option of the cycle counter. This can also have an ETM or a lapse time meter put in it. The difference between this control panel and the previous one is this has a dial timer instead of a digital display. The dial timers can go out. It's not uncommon. We've had really good luck with these tan ones, but all the other components are pretty much the same. You've still got your control circuit breakers, you've got your handoff auto switch, and you've got your motor contactor. This is a sand filter control panel. Now this happens to be the Orenco version. This is an SSF1 PT, and what that means is our first pump is time dosed. This would be the pump going to the sand filter, and this would be our discharge pump out to the drain field. Pretty much all the same components doubled up. This happens to be another control panel, the SJ Rhombus. Pretty much all the same components on this control panel as with the Orencos. The only thing different is, instead of circuit breakers, Rhombus uses fuses, which are underneath these covers. They look just like these spade type, and they will act as the circuit breakers. It does have a control circuit breaker for the controls. These are the breakers for the alarm functions. Has the same timer, has a motor contactor, has a cycle counter. It also has a handoff auto switch. The difference between the Rhombus control panel and the Orenco control panel is the terminal strip is different. On the Orenco control panel, the terminal strip goes this way. On the Rhombus, it'll go this way. But the good thing about it is it shows you what each float is doing, what each wire, where each wire needs to land, basically.
And now, Spokane's Jim Johnson introduces us to the CSI Controls RK Series control panel. Take it away, Jim.
Some of the features of the panel has both control and pump breakers. You can get them with both control, alarm, and pump breakers. Both the alarm and control sides are fused. When the fuse blows, The LED light, little red LED light above the fuse holder turns red. So it's a troubleshooting feature if you lose one leg of either alarm or control side, and that'll be very visual if the fuse is blown. The panel also comes with spare fuses on the back side of the faceplate. The display center will show you what the inches of water in your tank are from bottom of bell. So if you need to know total inches of water existing in the tank, you need to know how far the bottom of the bell is off the bottom of your tank. It's got a programmable alarm, and it also comes in a time dose model where you can set it up to time dose a drain field. You have power lights for both your alarm and control side. Those lights will light up green when you have power to those. It has a pump run light and a manual button. When you push the manual button, the pump run light's on, or if it's dosing at the given time you open up that panel, you'll see that green light on. It has a push to silence and test, so you can test your alarm, make sure your alarm function is working. You can also push that little black button to silence it. It comes with an alarm light on the top, big red beacon, and then your silencing pad is on the side of the panel. Just rub your fingers across that and that will silence the alarm. The panel itself comes with 50 feet of tubing. If you need more than that, you can buy bulk tubing. There are installations where it's been run several hundred feet without affecting the operation of the panel. And the tubing is a very tough, very difficult to kink tubing. Should be the only tubing that you use. Anything that you substitute may kink a little easier than this. And we can get couplers for this. You should have left about 5 to 7 feet in the tank, depending on the depth of your stinger dropping down to your pressure bell, because that bell may need to come out for servicing at some point in the future, and you need to have enough tubing at the tank end of it to be able to pull that out and lay it down and be able to work on it. We'll talk about mounting the pressure bell in the tank. The redundant off and low water alarm for this particular panel is a preset function of this bell that takes place right at the top of this union. So what I have most of my contractors do for ease of installation is run this bell down until it hits the top of your pump, and that'll guarantee you that depth of water, about 3 inches of water over your pump at all times. It can be run lower than that, but then you run the risk of not guaranteeing the submergence of your pump. So what you'll do is take your tubing that comes with the panel. You press the tubing down through the top of the fitting and it'll go in approximately 1/8 of an inch. Push it down past the grip ring and it'll go in about another 1/8 of an inch, and that seals it in the bottom. And then once you've got that in there, it's locked in place. To take the tubing back out, hold that ring down flat and the tubing will be released out of the grip ring. You want to make sure that this tubing is connected at the pressure bell and at the panel before the bell gets submerged in water. If the water level is 2 feet up, that is where the panel thinks that 0 is, and you'll get some false low water alarms and redundant offs. So what you'll do is cut your length of 2-inch schedule 40 to get this down to that point. Run your tubing down through it, spin the male adapter on, and then all your excess tubing will stay at the tank side. Tubing gets pulled back through the J-box and through the conduit with your pump cable back to the panel.
The front of this control panel is totally different, and so is the inside of the control panel. If you notice, the control panel is pretty much made up of a printed circuit board on the back side of the door. You've got some spare fuses, and then you've got your airline coupling that the tubing from the pressure bell comes back. This is how the control panel tells what the depth of the water is. You've got your hookups down here for your pump and your incoming power, and your motor contactor in the corner. There are no elapsed time meters and cycle counters in this control panel because they're all on the digital display that's on the door. The main problems that you'll see with this control panel, or what you'll want to check when you come out, is the digital display in the corner. It's going to give you your liquid level reading in the tank. If it's reading 0, then that means either one thing, the control panel has lost pressure in the tubing, for between the tubing and the pressure bell, or there is no water in the tank, it is pumped all the way down. So first thing you would do is open the tank, inspect to see how much water is in the tank. If there isn't any water in the tank, then you need to test the pressure bell on a 5-gallon bucket of water or something like that to test it. If there is water in the tank, you'll need to remove the pressure bell out of the tank, open the door of the control panel. You'll turn the control circuit breaker and the pump circuit breaker off. You'll take the coupling, and in order to open the airline, take the airline apart, you'll need to squeeze inward on this gray coupling and slide the tubing out. Let the control panel catch up basically with itself, get zeroed back out. Reattach the tubing, reattach the other half of the tubing that's going out to the wet well, turn the control panel on, push the pressure bell back down into the water, and you should start getting a reading on the digital display. The next control panel, or another one of the control panels that we carry, is the AquaWorks control panel. There's no identifiable markings on the outside of the control panel except the small AquaWorks logo in the center of the push to silence button. This too is not like the Orencos or the Rhombus panels when you open it up inside. The only thing you have in here is a printed circuit board, a transformer, a motor contactor, and a terminal strip. If you'll notice on the internals of this control panel, there is no handoff automatic switch. Carl Garrison, the person who made this control panel, did not want it to be homeowner friendly. He wanted to keep the homeowners out of the control panel, thereby eliminating any problems of them going out and manually pumping the systems down. One of the most common problems that you'll have with this control panel is the electrician doesn't hook up the black, blue, and red wires in the corresponding slots where they're supposed to. Looking at the control panel from left to right, it's supposed to be red, blue, and black, the BL being blue and the BK being black. And I've gone out numerous times and they'll install it red, black, blue. Now that you've seen all the different types of control panels that we stock and the different components inside of them, let's get to the actual troubleshooting portion of the class and see if we can't fix what's broken. Okay, with this particular control panel, we've simulated incoming electrical power right here, and we've got a float switch attached. We do have live voltage, it's 120 volts, and we're just going to kind of give you an idea of little components that you should test, where to test them, and how to test them to see if they're functioning. First thing we want to do is take our meter and switch it to voltage. This particular meter will register either AC or DC, and we're going to check for voltage in the control panel. Now what we want to check for, and this is over and over again, you only want to check to neutral. A lot of times the control panel, if you check it to ground, it will register as 120 volts, but if you check it to neutral and there's no neutral wire present, then you'll get a 0 reading right away, which will tell you, and that's the fastest way to know if you don't have electricity. So you find your neutrals, which are marked by the ends, touch any one of the screws on the meter, and then come down low on the circuit breaker, and as you notice, we've got 120 volts. So we've got incoming power into the control panel. Now what we're going to check is you've got your auto man and off switch. If we switch it into manual, the motor contactor engages. We know that there's no problems with the motor contactor. What we're going to do is take our auto off manual switch, we're going to flip it into manual. Oh, our motor contactor didn't go in. So somewhere between here and here, it's not getting electricity. So what we're going to do to check to make sure that our motor contactor is getting power is we'll take our meters, we go to A1 and A2, and we've got no power on the meter. We've lost our electricity somewhere between the handoff manual switch and the motor contactor. You can test the back side of the manual off auto switch with your probes again to neutral. These are only hot legs on the back side of here, so what you'll do is you'll take one of the leads, touch it on each of the terminals, the other lead will go down to the neutral bar. When we metered the electricity from the handoff auto switch to the neutral bar, it was determined that it was a faulty switch, So now we've replaced that. We take our switch and we go to manual, and now our motor contactor works again. We've determined that we had a faulty switch on the manual off auto. That was the first problem with this control panel. The second problem is we don't get a timer light when the float switch is activated, so what we're going to do is test our float. Now you're not going to do this in the voltage range, you're going to move it up to the continuity range, which means the meter will have when you have a closed circuit, which is how we're going to test the float switches, the meter will have a continuous beeping sound. With this particular control panel, our float switch is going to be connected to number 1 and number 4 for our timer on-off. Now what we're going to do is turn off our control and pump voltage. We're going to take our probe from number 1 to number 4, and with the float in the up position or the go position, we should get a continuity reading. Perfect. If we were to take our continuity check between number 1 and number 4 and we lifted the float and we've got an open circuit, there's two possibilities. Number 1 is there's a bad float switch or a bad wire nut out in the wet well. You can do a continuity check of the number 1 and number 4 wires just by wire nutting them together out in the wet well. That will check the wires from the control panel to the junction box in the wet well. You should get a continuity check on those. They should be a closed circuit. If that's the case, then you've got a bad float. What we're going to do now is test our timer. We're going to go to the control circuit breaker. We're going to turn that on. We're going to leave the pump circuit breaker turned off because we don't want to dose our pump out in the wet well while we're testing it. We're going to take our manual off auto switch. We're going to put it in auto. And now we're going to lift up our float switch, and we have a light on the timer now. When the motor contactor engages, it should be sending electricity out to terminals 5 and 6. And that is our pump leads. What we'll do is we'll check for voltage on 5 and 6 to see if we have 120 volts coming through the system. We've been working on this control panel for a while and we just can't quite figure out what's going on with it. This particular control panel is an Arenco control panel. If you were ever to have problems with one of these control panels and you happen to call myself or someone else or even the factory, what you'll want to do is make sure that you've got the model number, which is over here on the door, because without the model number of the control panel, no one will know what's going on and no one can help you. So there you have it. Panel troubleshooting really isn't that difficult, and if you do run into trouble, feel free to call myself or the factory or any one of the other people in the company.